Hey everybody, Phil here. Today I'm going to break down a huge hand between two high rollers in this $50,000 high roller WSOP event. They are three-handed playing for $1.5 million when this huge pot comes up. This hand starts with Bill Klein limping the small blind and Jans Arends with pocket eights in the big blind, going ahead and raising it up to 900,000. We head to a flop of 9-6 deuce rainbow. Bill checks, Jens bets, as he's often going to do here.
So he looks down at his chips. Prequel to usually putting them in the middle.
Klein might be feeling pretty good about those fours as well, considering a lot of the times he might be putting Arends on some overcard type hands in order to raise pre-flop.
There's a check raise.
2.2.
Bill's hand would usually be a call, but he decides to check raise. So Jens bets 700,000 into about 2 million. And Bill Klein raises to 2.2. Now, what Bill's thinking at this point is, my hand might be best. I think Jens is going to just continuation bet a bunch of the stuff that he raises pre-flop. If Jens has ace queen high, he's going to call me and I get value. If Jens has jack 10, he's probably going to fold and I deny him his 6 outs or 24-ish% equity. It's not that bad of a result. So Bill's raise is going to get called by worse. It is going to clear out some equity. It is building a bigger pot at this stage in the tournament than you kind of want to do with a marginal holding, but it's reasonable. Bill, who is a very wealthy recreational player, who actually, I believe, donates all of his winnings to charity anyways, can play these final tables in a fearless way that very few can. Jens, on the other hand, is a high-stakes regular, primarily online, but of course hops into live events like this as well. And while he's no stranger to playing for massive stakes as they are here, you still got to be a little uncomfortable. You still don't want to bust in an individual hand, especially three-handed, when you can ladder up and make several $100,000 just by somebody else busting while you sit there and watch the hand play out. So after Bill check raises at 2.2 million, Jens has no choice but to call.
But he does see Arends match his wager to build a pot to 6.5 million.
Turn pairs the 6 and brings a backdoor flush draw. The interesting thing here is that these players have a stack to pot ratio, otherwise known as SPR, of 1-to-1. They have roughly as much in their stack as there is in the pot. And usually at that point, you need to be thinking about, do I want to go all in with my hand? For value, do I want to go all in with my hand as a bluff? How much is my hand worth, more or less? Klein makes the decision to bet 1.6 million, about quarter pot. His thinking here is, well, I still think I'm beating hands like ace high. It's possible I got floated by a hand like queen jack with a backdoor flush draw. It's possible, of course, that he has a gut shot, and I want to protect my hand a little bit more. If Bill goes all in here for 6.5 million, he's almost always going to be beat when called. He's almost only getting called by a better hand. So at that point, he's kind of turning his hand into a bluff. Or really just making a protection jam. It wouldn't be the craziest play in the world, but I like his decision to go with this small bet, keep control of the action, because if you check and you face any size bet here, it's quite uncomfortable. And when you check call, it really looks like you have more or less what you have. Jans with pocket eights, very uncomfortable here on the turn. Bill is mostly repping a better hand. We are now very likely playing for stacks. Jans' tournament life. Potentially busting out in third place. He's facing a quarter pot bet. He has a hand that can beat some protection-y stuff like this, is still beating bluffs, could potentially improve. Obviously only 2 outs to the 8s, but it's worth something. He decides to call, and I like this call. I think, again, you're not thrilled being here, but you got to continue. I think if you're folding this, you're just folding way too much. And I do think, as we can see here, Bill can have a worse hand for quote-unquote value, and he can also have some bluffs, which I have learned the hard way.
Galfond falls for it.
Holy
Call.
The pot size is bigger than everything they've got behind. A critical river card. Comes the 5 of diamonds.
The river's a 5, and this does complete some draws, specifically if Bill were semi-bluffing with a hand like 7-8, if Bill were semi-bluffing with a hand like 4-3, he's now gotten there at the straight. Further, if Bill had a hand like 7-5, now he no longer needs to bluff. It eliminates a lot of potential bluffs from Bill's range. Bill recognizes this, and he's got an interesting spot here on the river with half pot left, where it's actually not inconceivable that if he shoves, he could get called by a worse hand. It's rare, but it could happen. And he could also fold out a better hand. Now, there are not many spots in poker where, especially Hold'em, where I think you can successfully merge bet. A lot of times people try to do this, and it's frankly ill-advised because, yes, it's in theory possible that they could call with a worse hand. Yes, in theory possible they can fold a better hand, but usually what happens in that case is they fold, almost all of the worse hands and call with most of the better hands or something like that. So most merges I would advise you against. It feels really cool to make a merge bet and have it work out. But it's pretty rare, especially in Hold'em. So with half pot remaining, Bill decides to shove, putting Jans all in for his last 5 million.
I'm all in.
Oh, wow.
And it's Arends with the shorter stack. A decision for his tournament life.
And Jans is getting 3-1 here. So he needs to be right in order to call about 25% of the time, but that's in chip EV. That's in theory and in chip EV. Whereas in practice, busting out now with 5 million in chips left, especially when you have a player who is not a high stakes professional, although as we can see, very comfortable and adept in these spots. Oftentimes you want to avoid the variance of calling. I think Jans is thinking about, well, what are the hands that Bill would bluff with on the flop? A lot of those have gotten there or have rivered a pair. Yes, there's the 10-8s and 10-7s that have not gotten there, and he would probably continue barreling with those. But if I balance those against all the 9x, which Bill's going to have a lot of, some of the random 6x, because if Bill's doing this with 4-4, he's probably doing it with some 6-5 as well. Jans has to worry about a whole bunch of 9x, a whole bunch of 6x, a whole bunch of straights that got there. He has to put Bill on a bluff. And like I said, a lot of those bluffs have now rivered a pair of 5s. So it's a really tough spot to be in. What I find really interesting about this hand is that Bill goes from value raising the flop to value betting / protection betting the turn to bluffing the river, more or less. You could argue it's a merge, but I think this is a river bluff. And so throughout the hand, he recognizes how things have changed. When he raises the flop, he's hoping to get a lot of folds. He knows sometimes he'll get called by an ace high or something like that. And had the turn been, let's say, a queen, he was probably going to check and hope to show down against ace high. When the turn's a 6, he decides, well, I think I can still get some more value and protection against ace high. I'm going to keep betting. So now Bill finds himself a little bit in no man's land, because on the flop, he's value raising. On the turn, he's value betting / getting protection, kind of. Now that he gets called on the flop and turn, he's not so confident that his hand is good. And with the 5 river connecting, he decides to make the aggressive play and put Jans in a extremely tough spot, especially when he has pocket 8s. Now, pocket 8s are not only losing to Bill's entire value range, 6x, 9x, rivered straights, full houses, but they actually block some key potential bluffs, namely 10-8. 10-7 and 10-8 are going to be Bill's most likely bluffs here. Blocking 2 8s removes a lot of combinations of 10-8s. And so he has a very bad calling hand. He would actually have a better calling hand if he had a hand like ace deuce, which ironically would actually lose to pocket 4s. And this is how a merge could happen in theory. The reason ace deuce is a better calling hand is because you unblock 10-8, you unblock 10-7, you have a deuce, which you're not expecting your opponent to bluff with. You have an ace, which you're not expecting your opponent to bluff with. So you have 2 cards that are in a value range, but not in a bluffing range. Whereas with 8-8, you have 2 cards that, yes, they're in 7-8, yes, they're in 9-8 and 6-8, but for the most part, they make a bigger chunk of a common bluffing range here than they do of a value range.
Oh, it looks like
cards in hand, and he folds, and Klein with the bluff shove.
After some deliberation, Jans decides to fold. I think I would have folded as well for all the reasons I mentioned. 8s are really bad blockers to hold in this case. And also I like to let Bill Klein bluff me. Now Bill asks Jans if he wants to see the hand. He agrees and then gets shown the bad news. I don't care how many high rollers you've played. That's going to get to you. It's going to throw you off your game a little bit, because you would have had the chip lead had you called here. You would have been effectively heads up with the chip lead, playing for a bracelet and 1.5 million. And instead you're the short stack, 3-handed, and you have a big fight ahead of you. Jans went on to finish 3rd in this event, although he got his revenge soon after in a 100K high roller. I hope you enjoyed listening to my thoughts on how the hand played out. I love watching Bill work. The hand that I've referenced a couple times now where he bluffed me on high stakes poker, I folded a straight in a spot where you should definitely not fold a straight. I was just so confident that he had it, because He's an older guy, and I'd never played with him before, and I just assumed that the way that he played the hand, he definitely had what he was representing. But as it turns out, he did not, and he did not have it here either.
Looks like Klein's creative juices may be flowing. They sure are. He bets $150,000.
I will see you in the next one. Till then, take care and good luck.
Galfond falls for it.
That's him.
If you were bluffing, which
really.
holy, that's Bill.
Really
You are sick. Whoa, you're sick.
All right, man.
You got one more.
She was like, all right, this is a nice time to show.
All right,
150 with 10 high.
But there was a 9 out there.
There was a 9.
Yep.
It looked
The
like
nine was
That's the only reason it made me do it.